Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're plunging into a story that really shook not just the U.S., but the world. The devastating Texas floods back in July 2025.
Yeah, and it wasn't just, another extreme weather event. It spun up very quickly into something much more contentious.
Exactly. It raised these huge questions about preparedness, didn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in, well, a leading developed nation. And it even brought the whole role of scientific observation into the spotlight.
Right.
So we've gathered a range of sources, articles, official reports, public statements. And our mission today really is to unpack it all. Not just the sheer scale of the disaster, which was immense, but also those human-contributed factors that many argue turned a really powerful downpour into, well, a national tragedy. And then there was the blame game that followed.
And, while extreme weather is, of course, a growing global issue, we're really focusing this deep dive specifically on the U.S. situation, Texas particularly, and those uncomfortable questions that surfaced about a country you'd expect to be, well, a leader in development and disaster readiness.
Okay, so let's start by setting the scene. Early July 2025, Texas gets hit by the most powerful downpour it had seen in, 50 years?
50 years, yeah. And the numbers, they're just grim. Over 100 people confirmed dead initially.
And some media reports were suggesting potentially much higher.
Yeah, pushing towards possibly over 200 fatalities eventually, plus 10 people still listed as missing even weeks later. It was devastating.
And the rain itself, the amount was just staggering.
Absolutely staggering. We're talking over 130 centimeters. That's more than 50 inches of rain.
50 inches?
In just 24 hours.
Wow. To give people context, how does that compare?
Well, it's double the monthly average rainfall for Texas, all concentrated into a single day. Just think about that volume of water.
It's hard to even picture. And the speed, the reports described it as terrifying.
Terrifying is the right word. River levels surged by 8 meters. That's about 26 feet.
26 feet.
In just 45 minutes. 45? Witnesses were calling it tsunami-like conditions downstream.
Just swept through. Sudden, incredibly swift, and utterly destructive.
And the human toll beyond the numbers was just heartbreaking. There was one incident that really stands out in the sources.
The summer camp.
Yes, the Christian summer camp. Over 20 children, mostly girls, tragically swept away by the flash floods.
They just couldn't get out in time.
No, the water rose too fast. And historically, this flood caused the most casualties in Texas since 1921. So truly a historic disaster in the worst way.
But you have to imagine seeing this level of devastation, especially in the U.S., a global leader. The public reaction must have been immediate. People must have been asking, how?
Oh, absolutely. The immediate reaction, you saw it everywhere in the reporting, was just disbelief. People saying, is this really happening in 2025 in the United States?
Yeah.
Where were the warning systems? What happened to the preparedness? I mean, Texas isn't exactly unfamiliar with floods, right?
No, it's historically prone. Billions in flood damages over the years.
Exactly. So it really felt to many like a fundamental breakdown of what a developed nation should be capable of preventing or at least mitigating much better.
And this is where the story really starts to shift, doesn't it? Because while, okay, yes, extreme weather, climate change, those are big underlying factors, everyone acknowledges that.
Sure, the baseline conditions.
But the immediate focus in the aftermath, it pivoted pretty quickly to, well, human-contributed elements. Things that people argued made the disaster much, much worse.
That's right. The conversation turned to systemic failures.
And the main target, initially, seemed to be the previous administration. What were the specific allegations there?
The core accusation, looking through our sources, really centered on budget cuts, deep cuts, apparently, and significant reductions in personnel at key agencies. We're talking NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and crucially, the National Weather Service, the NWS.
Crippling disaster response, essentially. That was the claim.
That was the claim, yeah, that these cuts left the systems weakened.
So what did that mean on the ground? Like specifically in Texas, during this event, what was the impact?
Well, according to reports, hundreds of meteorologists and other, weather-related staff had been let go across these agencies in the preceding years.
Hundreds?
Yes, leading to pretty significant gaps in personnel. And the NWS union, they made a very specific statement. They said that the actual region in Texas hit hardest by this flood. It didn't have a single meteorologist, forecaster, or hydrologist assigned to it anymore.
Not one.
Not one. Apparently, the existing staff covering that area had departed just a couple of months earlier, April 30th, due to these federal staff reduction packages.
So the timing couldn't have been worse? critical expertise just wasn't there.
Exactly when it was needed most.
And the NWS itself, it's part of NOAA, under the Commerce Department.
Yeah.
The overall staff loss there was significant too, wasn't it?
Yeah, the figures reported were around 600 employees lost out of a total of about 4,000 under the previous administration. That's a substantial portion.
So when the Commerce Department was asked about this, about the NWS situation, what did they say?
Well, their response was quite defensive, based on the reports. They outright denied any NWS budget cuts.
Denied the cuts.
The budget cuts, yes. And they claimed that the NWS's forecasts during the event were actually timely and accurate. They used that as proof, saying it showed the NWS still had sufficient capacity.
Which must have just confused people even more, right? Because the union is saying there's no one there, but the department says capacity is fine.
Precisely. It created this conflicting narrative that, according to many sources, just added to the public's confusion and frustration.
And this whole issue, it wasn't just confined to immediate weather forecasting, was it? The sources point to broader concerns about, like, the value placed on scientific observation overall.
That's a really important thread here, yes.
Yeah.
It highlights how crucial that sustained long-term scientific observation is. It's not just about collecting data points. It's about building this deep, irreplaceable understanding over time.
And the prime example of that concern was the planned closure of the Mauna Observatory in Hawaii.
Exactly. Mauna. It's famous, iconic, really. Sitting up at, what, nearly 3,400 meters? It's considered the cleanest air environment for these kinds of measurements.
And it has this incredible track record.
70 years. Continuously measuring atmospheric CO2 since 1958. Its data is like the global benchmark.
So the idea of closing it.
It sent shockwaves through the scientific community, and it wasn't just Mauna Loa. The plan, reportedly, was to shut down all 3 primary U.S. CO2 measurement sites.
All 3. Why?
Well, critics immediately raised alarms. They worried it was an intentional move to create a kind of blind spot in our understanding of climate data, essentially making it harder to track the changes that are happening.
So if you put that together, the alleged staffing cuts at NWS, the delayed warnings we'll get to, and then this potential dismantling of long-term climate monitoring, it paints a worrying picture.
It really does. It suggests, or at least raises the question, about whether the erosion of specific expertise, both immediate forecasting and long-term observation, could leave a nation dangerously vulnerable, turning a severe event into something, well, potentially preventable, or at least less catastrophic.
And the events on the ground during the flood really seem to bear out that breakdown in immediate response, that warning alarm.
Yeah, the timeline there is stark. Local fire services, seeing the danger escalating, requested a general warning alarm for residents at 4 a.m.
4 in the morning, okay.
And approval apparently took 6 hours. 6.
So the alarm didn't go out until 10 a.m.
Some alerts only reached residents by 10 a.m.,
Yeah.
Hours after the rivers were already surging, hours after the worst danger had begun for many.
And meanwhile, people trying to get help, contacting FEMA.
That was another major issue highlighted in the sources. Citizens trying to reach FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, reportedly found them unreachable.
Just couldn't get through.
Reports described phone lines ringing out, essentially no one to answer calls. And again, this was widely attributed in reports to those alleged staffing cuts under the previous administration. People were in dire need, and the primary federal agency for help was, apparently, unavailable.
Which brings us to the reaction from officials. Because amidst this chaos and tragedy, there was this pattern of, well, denial and deflection emerging.
A very noticeable pattern, yes.
Let's start with the former president. His response drew a lot of criticism, didn't it?
It did. First, there was criticism for him being seen golfing during the peak of the crisis.
Right.
His actual visit to the flood site with Melania didn't happen until a full week after the disaster hit.
A week later. And when reporters finally did ask him about the slow response, and specifically about the potential link to those staff cuts,
his response became quite famous, or infamous, depending on your view. He stated, "Only God knows how these kinds of events happen."
Only God knows.
And then, when pressed directly on whether the staff cuts might have contributed to the deaths, he called that question devilish.
Devilish.
Yes. He asserted that the Texas officials on the ground were heroic, and that asking such questions was an insult to their dedication.
Did he address the specific issue of the missing meteorologists?
He was asked point blank if those meteorologists should be rehired.
And?
His answer was an emphatic no. He claimed it wouldn't have made any difference because the event happened in seconds, his words. implying it was completely unpredictable.
In seconds.
Yeah.
Despite the NWS's own mission being forecasting.
Exactly. It seemed to dismiss the entire field of meteorology and forecasting in that moment.
And this kind of deflection, it wasn't just him, right? It came from other official channels, too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. It cascaded. The White House spokesperson at the time echoed that God's will sentiment. They called criticism of the president absurd and labeled attempts to link the response to policy as shameful and disgusting politicization of a tragedy.
So deflect and attack the questioner.
Pretty much. And then you had the Homeland Security Secretary try to shift responsibility entirely, stating the Texas flood was, quote, not our job.
Not their job. Whose job was it then?
It was a state government's responsibility, according to the secretary, pushing it entirely onto Texas.
Okay, so what about the state level? The Texas governor, a Republican, how did he respond when pressed on state preparedness?
Well, according to reports, he was quite dismissive of critics, allegedly calling them losers.
These losers.
And urged everyone to move towards constructive talks instead of pointing fingers.
It's just layer upon layer of deflection.
It really is. And just to add one more layer of political strangeness.
Go on.
The former president, at a later point, reportedly tried to pin the blame elsewhere again, stating the disaster was somehow Biden's fault.
Biden's fault. How?
So, due to some vague setup, apparently. But then, almost immediately, he added that he was being generous and wouldn't actually blame Biden for what he called a 100-year disaster.
Right. So blame him, but say you're not blaming him. It's confusing.
It added to the overall sense of political maneuvering rather than addressing the core issues. And the blame game didn't even stop there. It went into, well, outright conspiracy territory.
Oh.
Yeah. Sources reported on a claim from one particular House representative, someone known for promoting conspiracy theories,
Okay.
who claimed that the climate was manipulated by Democrats specifically to attack Republican Texas.
Manipulated the climate.
Manipulated the climate to cause the flood as a political attack. That was the claim.
Wow. Okay. So let's try and pull all these threads together then. You've got the devastating flood itself, the questions about preparedness, the alleged staff cuts crippling key agencies, the delayed warnings on the ground, FEMA being unreachable, and then this whirlwind of official denial, deflection, and even conspiracy theories. What picture does that paint for Texas in that moment?
The picture that emerges from piecing together these sources is one of, as some described it, a blind state.
Blind.
Yeah. Blind in the face of disaster. The combination of the alleged budget cuts, the resulting personnel gaps, the slow communication, the confused or deflected responses, it effectively left the state and its residents incredibly vulnerable and ill-equipped to handle a disaster of this scale.
It's just such a paradox, isn't it? You have this leading global power, the United States, experiencing a catastrophe like this, but with all these layers suggesting human error or deliberate downscaling played a huge role.
It led to this strange perception, noted in some commentaries, of almost a comedy of errors playing out against a backdrop of immense tragedy. A feeling that some of this, perhaps much of it, shouldn't have happened this way.
And it really throws into sharp relief how politics can interfere with basic functions, like disaster response.
Absolutely. This case becomes a stark example, perhaps, of how deep political polarization can potentially derail accountability, effective response, and even the acceptance of scientific input. It creates this cycle of blame
Right.
that, for you, the listener, can make it really hard to see the underlying systemic issues clearly. Issues of preparedness, funding, scientific integrity, they get obscured by the political noise.
So stepping back this deep dive, we've walked through the devastating floods themselves, the serious questions that immediately arose about government preparedness, about staffing at crucial agencies, and then those subsequent layers of denial, deflection, and blame that unfolded in the aftermath.
And it really forces us, I think, to consider the value that society places or perhaps doesn't place on scientific expertise, on long-term observation, and just on the basic infrastructure designed to protect people.
So here's something to maybe think about as you go about your day. What are the real long-term consequences for public safety, for disaster response, when that scientific expertise, when that infrastructure is questioned or maybe even actively dismantled?
And maybe what responsibility do we all have as societies to actually prepare for these increasingly unpredictable events, especially when expert warnings and critical data are reportedly ignored, suppressed, or just lost in the political static?
Definitely something to mull over.